Here are 5 photo editing mistakes you're probably gonna make if you haven't already made them, and what you can do instead in order to avoid them. Roll the intro. Hey, what's up? It's your favorite video game character, Nicholas here, back at it again with another video, and photo editing is awesome. I love photo editing, I'm pretty damn goated at it, and if you want proof to that claim, here's what I can do. So yeah, that's what I can do. I specifically designed these tips in order to help you, regardless of how heavy or light the edits that you want to do will be, just so that you can improve your images even just a little bit better. I want to help you skip having to learn these lessons yourselves the hard way like I did. I made these mistakes, so hopefully, you don't have to. Starting with number 1. Overdoing skin retouching. I think I am the most guilty individual in doing this mistake. Especially when I was starting out, I wasn't looking at people's faces as people's faces. I was looking at people's faces as textures. What you don't realize when you do that so trigger happy and so liberally is that as you do that one by one, you're beginning to erase a lot of distinguishing features of people's skin and faces that make their skin and faces their skin and faces. And I know the way that I just worded that sounds really visceral, but hey, what do you expect from a sociopath? Anyway, basically my point is making sure that you're keeping an eye on yourself if you're overdoing smoothing people's skin a little too much. What I would do is just reduce the opacity of the healing brush by a little bit. I wouldn't go above 80% unless it's a really difficult thing to remove. Play around with a feathering of the brush because one way or another it might help how it blends the way that it's healing. I could make a whole video just about skin retouching, and I probably will given how much I have to say about it, so I'm gonna leave it here for now. Point is, be careful and keep an eye out and make sure that you don't overdo it to the point where you erase people's identifying features. Easy enough? So, keeping in that vein of overdoing something, we have number 2. Overcooking your edit. Main offenders for overcooking are contrast, saturation, and me in the kitchen. What I mean is getting a little too trigger happy, thinking that more is better when sometimes more is just more and more is too much. Overcranking sliders like exposure, contrast, saturation, thinking that the brighter the images, the better. The more contrast and pop there is, the better. The more saturation there is and color pop there is, the better. But sometimes overdoing all of these sliders to the absolute extreme is just not the way to go. Actually, I take that back. Most of the time, doing that is just really not the way to go. I don't think that the things that I mentioned earlier are necessarily a bad thing. Upping your contrast, upping your saturation, those could work really well for your images. In fact, most of the time they work pretty well for me. But that's the thing. You have to do it carefully, nudging it slowly and seeing how gradually things change if you go up or down the slider, and just seeing how little you actually need to go up or down rather than immediately pushing it to its limits. Hey, what's up? It's mid-roll subscriber Push Nicholas here. If you're enjoying this video so far, and if you're vibing with me, you like my accent, you like the general aesthetic of this channel, leave a like and subscribe. Click that notification bell. It would really help out and it would let you know when the video is coming out, or check out the photos and the edits that I do. You can follow me at Sentient Poison and at Nicholas Lolin. All my links are down in the description as well. I'm talking way too fast. I'm running out of breath. Let's get back to the video. Now, overcooking is one thing, but then there comes deep frying the ever-loving hell out of something that you shouldn't. Number 3. Clarity and Dehaze. Ah yes, the brothers of chaos when it comes to photo editing. See, here's the thing. I love clarity and dehaze, but precisely because of that, I have had to learn the hard way that you really need to be careful and deliberate where you push them and how much. Whether you push them back or forward, you have to be careful about how hard you do it. Pushing these sliders might just be the right move for the certain photo that you're working on, but it goes wrong when you're not deliberate and decisive about when you do it and you just do it to do it. Even worse, and where it goes really wrong, is when you start pushing clarity up and up and up in order to compensate for a lack of detail. There are places where clarity and dehaze belong. Some images that I've made have turned out looking so much better when I push those sliders all the way up. Each and every image is going to have a different reaction to you applying the chemicals of clarity and dehaze. Figure out what works for you for the certain image that you have, or figure out what works for you in general for the style of editing that you do. Like I said, more clarity, more dehaze, more detail, more contrast, more crunch. If you want that kind of look, push it up. If you push it down, clarity and dehaze introduce a lot of softness, a little bit of glow, a little bit of fog. So if that's the kind of effect that you're trying to go for, push it down. Now, in the vein of talking about detail, you might also run into issues with number 4, sharpening and noise reduction. Now, this issue goes both ways, overdoing or not doing it at all. If you don't use them, your image probably is going to end up a lot noisier than it should be. But if you overdo it, you lose a lot of the details that are there in the image that matter. You over smoothen it to the point where it ends up looking like mush, like an oil painting, like it's too smooth to be real. Sharpening works the same way. If you overcrank and overcompensate, it ends up really botching the way that the image looks because, again, it ends up just crunching it, squeezing that image for as much detail as it can get when maybe there's no detail left to squeeze. It's just crispening each and every pixel to the point where it looks like it's crispening each and every pixel. If you're doing a lot of heavy edits like I am, I tend to do pretty heavy color noise reduction in order to just smoothen the gap between each color that I'm playing with. With sharpness, I usually go from 35 to like 50. With radius, I've found that radius is actually super helpful. I turn it up to around 1.8, 1.9, and then that's basically it. That's basically what I'm working with. Okay, everything so far I've said is pretty subjective, but one thing seems to be more subjective than anything, and that is how you stylize and color grade your images. Generally, with most edits though, I think that they can fall apart in one of two ways. A, crushing the blacks and fading the whites a little too hard, and B, overdoing color separation with selective color, particularly the HSL sliders. These two can break your image as much as they can make it. Fading your blacks and whites can result in a pretty cool aesthetic look, especially back in 2016 when it was trendy. But, as I said before, in a lot of these issues, overdoing it is the real danger. So what I'd suggest is if you like that faded look, which I personally do as well, just try to backtrack a little, just to see how much fade you can have while still being happy with it, and also how much less you can turn back and still have a result that looks cool in your eyes. Same way with color separation. Tweaking your hue, saturation, and luminance too much for each color can break your image. Literally, you will see breaking lines, because you have to remember that each color feeds into the other, especially the ones that they're literally next to, left or right. So if you're modifying orange, you gotta watch out for how modifying orange affects the reds and the yellows. You gotta watch out for how the luminance is being treated in one color, because it will probably bridge over to the way that it cascades down to the next one. Another tip is that you will be able to utilize the color noise reduction here in order to help you smoothen out those lines a little bit better if you really want to push it. Stylizing images is great, but you also have to ask yourself, how stylized should you really go? These are just a few things you can look out for the next time that you're editing. You don't have to edit the exact same way all the time. You don't have to stick to the way that you're editing right now. Feel free to experiment and see what you can do more or less of, just to see if it can make your edit a little bit better. I hope that you can use my advice as a guide and also as a reminder for the things that you should look out for. Sometimes the best way to know if your edit is good enough is to stop editing. And I know it sounds counterintuitive, but trust me, just rest your eyes. Get off the computer for a little bit, or get off the phone, whatever you're editing with. Rest those eyes, separate your mind from thinking about that specific image or that project or that set. Then come back in an hour or two and see how much your opinion has changed. This all sounds silly and counterproductive, especially just like taking a step back after like spending an intense amount of time editing, but trust me, it really helps. I really had fun making this video, and I hope that the stuff that I had to say helped you out. And if it did, I would really appreciate it if you shared this video and left a like and subscribed and click that notification bell. If you want to see the edits that I make myself, you can go ahead and follow me on Instagram at sentientpoison and at Lolin. Anyway, that's it for me for now. I really appreciate you sticking around, and hey, I hope to see you in the next video. Once again, my name is Nicholas. Cheers. Woo! Dude, imagine if the microphone wasn't on and I recorded for like 50 minutes. I actually had like a mini panic attack just now.